What is up, Asymmetry? Oof, this one's a long time in the making. I feel like I say that a lot, but I genuinely anticipate these conversations with inspirational people or people knowledge about a subject matter that I've been like really, really mulling over in my head in those dark moments where you're in the midsection wiring a bonsai tree and it feels like you're never going to finish and you're just kind of stuck there with your thoughts. But today's guest, Irene Taylor, is an absolute titan in the world of documentary filmmaking. The name might sound familiar because she was the director of Trees and Other Entanglements, a film on HBO Max that I was fortunate enough or unfortunate enough, depending on how you perceive it, to be a subject in an interweaving of narratives of 5 individuals whose realities are really closely attached or tied to trees. But beyond Trees and Other Entanglements, Irene's made cutting-edge films and award-winning documentaries from Here and Now about her deaf parents and their experience getting cochlear implants and the ability to hear, to Leave No Trace, which was a groundbreaking film about the Boy Scouts and decades of abuse that had happened and the culpability with that situation. She won a Dupont Award for that particular piece. Most recently, I Am Celine Dion, released last year at the Lincoln Center and is still to this day the most globally viewed documentary on any live streaming platform in history. But I wanted to really sit down with Irene, knowing her capacity, and talk with her about her creative process and her background and how she goes about really touching on the pulse of some of the most intimate human stories in a way that creates beauty and the ability to accept these hard realities with the kind of grace that she's able to handle really, really challenging subject matter with. And we had a great conversation. It was really enlightening. And as a fellow creative, I still to this day say Irene Taylor is the most powerful creative that I've ever had the opportunity to work with. So I'm super proud to bring this conversation to you guys. She's incredible. And really, if you have any curiosity about what high-level documentary filmmaking looks like, check out Irene Taylor's filmography in the link below and take a look at some of her films because they're all very different, very unique, but done at the very highest level of creativity in the filmmaking endeavor. Sit back, relax, and enjoy, y'all. Irene Taylor. Well, this is a long time in the making.
Yes, it is.
Right?
Yeah. We have talked about this for a few years since we finished our film, and I couldn't decide today if it was a good idea to watch the film again before we talked, or if I should instead just rely on the residual memories of our creative process, the details of the film, but the narrative I'll never forget. So I'm just coming at it with a not a fresh perspective. It's really more of a evolved perspective because I haven't watched the film in a couple of years. So.
Well, I mean, you could say it's the freshest perspective then.
Yeah, because I think we always watch or experience art where we're at. So, I made it several years ago, and I have evolved as a filmmaker. I've evolved as a person. My friendship with you has evolved. So I think that makes sense to always, I think it is hard as a filmmaker sometimes to look back on the films. It's not like I just watch my films and warmth washes over me and I think, wow, that was a great job. I see the person I was when I made the film sometimes.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Does it take you back to where you were at the time when you made the film? Do you remember all of the things that you were going through when you watch a film independent of the film? Or is it just like about the film that you're getting this nostalgic hit?
It's more I'm cringing or nodding my head in positivity about my process. So I'm critical of myself. A lot of people are journal writers. I've never been able to be a journal writer because I cringe at what I was thinking at that time. Because I'm never thinking the same thing exactly twice. So, a film, even though I make documentaries and I'm not necessarily trying to make an autobiography. In fact, I am never trying to make an autobiography. At the same time, they're all autobiographies.
Oh.
Yeah.
As in they're telling your story, telling you things about yourself, telling you where you're at that time?
It's really more telling me what I chose to include, what I chose not to include. I chose to hold longer on that shot. Oftentimes when you're working with an editor, and I did work with an editor, but I also edited some of the scenes of the Trees film. Sometimes an editor may make a stylistic choice to, for example, cut an image after a person is finished speaking. Whereas I might ask you to just hold on to that shot a little longer, because sometimes what's interesting, particularly if it's a moment where your subject is having a profound realization, or they are acknowledging something that maybe they haven't spoken about before. And these things often happen to me. That's one of the things about filmmaking, is that people come, not always, but I hope they will come to trust me. And so these films become revelatory. And sometimes the space after they have said something says a lot. And so those are little things I remember. I literally remember every cut of the film. I can't go back and tell you now, oh, this came, then this came next, then this came next. I do forget the order, the linear order of a film. But every time I watch the film, I remember that moment, editing that moment, and deciding to hold on for an extra 2 seconds or to cut off very quickly, because sometimes, for example, sometimes it's the other way. Someone might tell you something that is very revelatory about themselves, and it was a moment of introspection. But then what happens is that they have a human reaction that many of us have in social situations, which is that then they feel a moment of, oh, why did I say that? Or should I have said that? And so then they backpedal, and by backpedaling, I don't mean this as a criticism. I mean it like it's something as simple as, well, you know what I mean, or at least that's what I felt then. It's something that kind of undercuts the profundity of what they said. And it's amazing how when you do tell a story, one of the things you can do is you can leave those moments out, so that all your audience is left with is that profound thought that my subject earned. My subject earned that perspective. And even if after, I think this happens sometimes when I was talking to you, you told me a lot about your life, and you told me a lot about your time in Japan, I remember, and we really didn't know each other very well. The part of the film that tells your story in Japan, or rather tells you telling your story of Japan, I didn't know you very well. I think it was maybe just the second or third time we shot together, and you had these really kind of shocking things to express about your experience, whether that was the depths of your passion and your commitment, and also just your complete inability to be flexible, because you were essentially an indentured craftsman. And I just remember finding it so amazing, really, that you had gone through that experience. But sometimes after you were done telling me something, you would backpedal a little and essentially saying something to the effect of, Well, that was just my experience, as if you really believe no one else in the world may have had that experience. And I think probably not many people in the world have had some of those experiences you've had. But I do think that sometimes if you can just pluck these thoughts out of people's commentary and you don't play what comes before it and you don't play what comes after it, it's like left suspended in the universe, and it has more power because it doesn't have the preamble or the postscript.
Sure.
Yeah,
it's untethered at that point.
Yeah. And hopefully it allows you to be more dense in your storytelling. By dense, I mean, you want a distillation. I mean, we shot probably 125 or 130 hours for the Trees film. I would say 60 or 70 hours was with you. We ended up filming more with you.
Yeah. Well, it was certainly a unique experience for me. Obviously one that when you approached me about it, I was not super excited about, because I had so many challenging experiences with journalism in general. I really find, actually to your point that you just expressed, I really find that to be a point of vulnerability with the subject of a journalistic story, whether it be video or print, where it's up to the journalist or the documentarian to pick those moments out. And when they are untethered and they lack the context, they can say something totally different than you as the subject were actually trying to say. And so it's like, now all of a sudden you've made yourself vulnerable to this individual that you don't know. You don't know their intentions. You don't know their angle. You don't know their orientation to the world. And you are essentially attaching yourself to them and saying, I give my permission, which effectively is I'm passing on my approval and credibility to this individual. And boy, it has smoked me at times. It has really, I think, because of the foreign nature of my experience and because of the inability for people in the United States and the Western world to understand the methodologies, the cultural implications, and what I myself deemed appropriateness in what I was experiencing, whether I liked it or not, is a different subject altogether. But I subjected myself to it because I accepted that it was what I asked for and what I needed to get to where I wanted to go.
Sure.
So then you start speaking about it and people are like, wow, that sounds hard, or that sounds unfair, or that sounds at times inappropriate. And it's like, yeah, but it doesn't, that's not the way. If you take all context and all tethers of that situation, that's actually not how it was. But getting somebody to cross that bridge, I don't even know, it might require experience in that culture at a depth, which you've had a lot of experience in other cultures as well. And so I think you probably understand this aspect of the conundrum of trying to present it to somebody that doesn't have that background, and them being able to handle that subject matter with the kind of respect and awareness that allows for the correct representation of your subject's experience to be expressed. But like, that was really my hesitation in getting involved, was I had had enough journalists that just wanted to piggyback on the sensational notion of this foreign experience and the rigor of the training that I underwent in my apprenticeship. And I think they wanted to use it for the wrong reasons, and I think they wanted to use it in a way that spoke to the Western mind about the appropriateness or inappropriateness. And that just wasn't what I was there to speak about. Like, I was happy to talk about my experiences, but I wasn't there to provide a critical dialogue of whether it was right or wrong. It was right as far as I was concerned, because I went and asked somebody for that and he gave it to me, So I think I think the more that I've watched and experienced in terms of like these projects and my story being told by individuals outside of myself and my narrative distilled by different documentarians and journalists, I have recognized like it's really necessary to be very selective. And it's almost impossible to know the motivation of somebody. Well,
and I think to be fair to the journalists out there who came before me, they may not have even known their motivation. They were just curious. I mean, what you do is so rare, and the extent to which you do it is even more rare. There's a lot of bonsai hobbyists out there, a lot of bonsai artists out there who are contributing to the community in the field, but you're really pushing the envelope of aesthetic, in part because you just deal in volume. The more trees you cycle through, the more you learn about them and the more you try, you know, and I think that's irresistible for storytellers. And so I think you probably are ripe for the picking.
Well, and certainly in an inexperienced time in my life, I was blood in the water, you know, ultimately for a journalist to sort of feast on this uniqueness.
You know, we have so many brand slogans out there in the world, and I don't know where I saw this, but maybe you've seen, everyone has a story. Everyone has their story, or come find your story. You know, it's become a little bit of a cliche.
Yeah.
But as someone who works in this every day, it's my craft, it's my profession, it's my living. I would say everyone has a story, sure, but really only that person knows their story. And unless you are creating an autobiographical, purely personal piece, me telling your story is not necessarily your story. It's your story as told by me. And I say that because typically in the films I make, 2% of what I record makes it into the film. And so I am throwing away way more than I'm including. And so you can look at it as the subject after it's been told and say, but I told you all this stuff about this, and we went deep into this part of my life, and yet you just chose to focus on this one thing. And when you only choose to focus on that one thing, it makes me look a little lopsided. I don't feel like me. That doesn't feel like who I am. So I think that the trust is commendable, and I genuinely can say this, I never stop marveling at the trust I'm given.
Yeah.
Even if someone doesn't fully trust me, I know when I walk out the door, if I don't see them for 2 months, if I don't communicate sufficiently, then perhaps they think, ooh, what is she going to do with my story? You know, there's a nervousness there, and I anticipate that. So I try to prevent that by staying in touch with my subjects during the filmmaking process. You know, I'm making a film right now that I've been working on for 3 years since I finished Trees. And there's kind of an end in sight, but I'm not sure because it really depends on my subject matter. She's a race car driver, and her story revolves around going to the Mint 400 every year. This is a race in the desert outside of Las Vegas. It's a rip-roaring good time. The story is very fun, but her personal story is grueling. And so the film is this point and counterpoint all the time about here we are having fun driving dune buggies through the desert in my VW Bug, but there's this undercurrent of social tension, political tension, and safety. What she's doing is quite dangerous. And so when I do these projects for a long period of time, I realize that sometimes trust can be a little fragile. And so I do have a tremendous sense, as corny as it sounds, I do have a tremendous sense of gratitude because I couldn't do what I do. And I don't just mean work as a journalistic documentarian. I make documentary films, and increasingly over my career, I've tried to make them more and more aesthetically thoughtful. But I don't always have the full trust of my characters, because they may be at a time in their life where they really need to know I'm going to focus on what's important to them. And we don't always, frankly, we don't always talk about it, because when I go to the edit room, that's kind of that's my cave. And I go and I do my thing. And, now 12, 13 films in, I don't share with my subject the film until it's done. Because if I share with them one scene of 7 in a film, they're going to get a lopsided view of what that story may be. So when I do sit down eventually to watch a film with my characters, as I did with you, I don't know if I said this or not to you, but I know in my mind I'm always wanting to tell them, just watch it all the way through. Because things that happen sometimes come full circle, or we see a story go in a direction that is surprising. And so I do realize it is a two-way street for sure. And I'm grateful to you, as I am to many of the others who have trusted me.
Yeah. I never really realized like the responsibility that you
Is this recording? I just don't see the waveforms.
It's absolutely recording.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you though.
I'm so sorry.
Your technical eye is valued.
Well, when I'm in the field, so as a director, depending on how many people you're lucky to have on your team, I have one ear listening to my subject, and then I have another ear listening to background noise through an earbud, and I'm seeing where the camera is pointed, but in my peripheral vision, I'm looking at all the other opportunities of where I could turn my camera.
Sure.
So just so that your listeners can picture this, we are sitting across from one another, but I'm the one who has to look at your technical board. So I'm seeing audio levels go up and down, and I'm seeing an interface that I'm very familiar with.
Do you want me to shut it off?
And I'm thinking...
would that be easier for you?
No, I'll just look at you.
Well, it's tough because it adds motion, like...
Well, so it's a little distracting.
Why did you become a storyteller? Like, did you intend that? Is this something from a young age that you enjoyed? Was this a part of your life from a young age? Like, how did this happen?
I think it started with static imagery. So simply put, photographs. My parents were both hobby photographers and filmmakers. Lucky for me. And when I say hobby, I mean pretty high level of hobby. I think there's a lot of people in the bonsai world. It's a nice corollary because people say, "Oh, I just do it as a hobby," but meanwhile they have beautiful trees that they've been, working on for decades. And my parents did not make their living taking photographs or making movies, but they had a dark room in all the houses I ever lived in growing up. The 2 houses I grew up in both had dark rooms. One of the dark rooms was 600 square feet.
Whoa. Yeah. I didn't realize that.
Yeah, with temperature controlled water. My dad was by training, he had a master's in chemistry. And he ended up being an engineer, and later in his career, he was a professor of engineering. And so everything that he did precisely. And it was pretty much the entire basement of our home when I was growing up. And then the second half of my growing up, I was in a different house where we had another dark room, much smaller. It was basically a closet underneath a stairwell. But my current work today, probably does date back to taking pictures, choosing the picture I want to print, printing it, making the picture look the way I want it to look, taking out imperfections, dodging, burning light areas of the film. And then as I went through my adolescence, I was a very active photographer, and that was kind of my thing. I played sports, but that wasn't really my tribe. My tribe was really being by myself in a dark room, whether that was in my school at the time or whether it was at home in the dark room we had at home. And I would delight in bringing an image to life. I still remember the thrill I would feel from a very young age. It's one of my earliest memories, actually, of putting a piece of paper into this developer, D76, for you listeners out there who know darkroom photography. And I loved the smell. Go figure. And I would watch over the course of 60 seconds this image come to life. But it wouldn't come to life in daylight. It would be in a red lit dark room. And so it wasn't really till a few minutes later when you'd flip the light on, when it was no longer light sensitive, that I'd be like, oh, there's dust. Dang, there's dust right on the face. Well, is it dust that I could touch up? So I just loved this process. And in fact, quick diversion to the Trees film, there's a moment in the Trees film where we watch the epic photography being made by Beth Moon in the darkroom. And she is printing a picture of a bristlecone pine. We also see her printing a picture of an oak seed. And we were able, I should say, my brilliant cinematographer, Nick Midwig, was able to jerry rig basically a crane system on top of her printing tray. And we got to watch these images come to life. And it's just that, along with the time lapse of your Monterey cypress in the film, those are the two most thrilling, process-oriented moments in the film for me. And so I've always loved that sort of process of the imagery coming to life. Then I went to college, majored in journalism, eventually went back to school and got a master's in radio, what we're doing right now. And it wasn't because I wanted a career in radio necessarily, although I secretly do just want to spend the rest of my life interviewing people and podcasting and not worrying about the visuals anymore. But I realized when I started making radio documentaries in graduate school, I was like, wow, this is really something. When you can take this and this and this and you can take it out of order, you can move it around. And then I thought, well, what if I apply my skill set of the visual language of storytelling? And documentary was the perfect combination of those two things. So I think it was a love for the gift of gab that I have, and also just my deeply formative experience as the daughter of photographers who just kind of grew up around it, and then all of the kind of warm and fuzzy feelings that go with that. So
what is this gift of gab? How did you develop this gift of gab?
I think, the textbook answer to that would be, for those who know me, I have deaf parents. I think that's probably the easiest explanation. I was speaking for my parents when they could not speak for themselves. They are both very literate people, well-educated, have traveled the world. They have lots of life experience, but their voices sound different than ours do. So sometimes they needed a proxy. They needed someone to translate what they were saying. And really what I would do is I would just repeat what they said with my voice. That was easier to understand for most people. So I wouldn't necessarily call myself an interpreter. I was more of a repeater. Because I wasn't really interpreting anything, because I would hope that someone was actually following what they were saying. So I would just kind of repeat it to make sure they could fill in the gaps of what they didn't understand. I also think I'm a thinker. I like to think about things. Those of you who know me, I am asking endless questions. I've been spending a lot of time at the ocean lately, and I took my brother down there, who's a physicist. He's a physics teacher and engineer by training, and I just kept saying, but why does the low tide come back lower than the one before? And why does the high tide do this? And how come it's not the same time as yesterday, the tide? And I just kept asking him so many questions, and he would have answers for me. And finally, he just got exhausted by me, and he just said, Irene, I'm just going to buy you a book about tides. I do have endless questions, and I'm not afraid to ask them. I think that's partly where I'm a good personality fit for documentary filmmaking, because I will easily spend extra time and extra money in my films to just ask more questions, even though plenty of people would be satisfied with a much more efficient process than I tolerate. I overshoot, I over-interview, I spend a long time editing. My films can take anywhere from, my shortest film has probably taken 6 months, and my longest film is probably going to be the one I'm making now about the race car driver, which might go on for 4 years, 5 years. Our film together, our Trees film, I think took about 3.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Do you feel when you're making films that are starting to take more and more time, do you feel like an increasing pressure or an increasing urgency? Like what is that like to start out on a subject matter and then it just continues and there's no finality to this story that you're trying to tell? Mm-hmm.
Well, you've just nailed probably the hardest question. If you're going to direct your own film, particularly if you're going to direct your own nonfiction film, your subject is not dying at the end of the film unless you are telling a story about someone who has died. So you are effectively stopping their life or stopping the picture you are giving people of their life, and you're not allowing it to grow any further after that. It's a finite thing when you finish these films. So when do you know the film is over? And I think in the case of the Trees film, I had several subjects, and you each had a story, and I wasn't sure when it was going to be over. I wasn't sure what it would make it feel over. I could talk to you about your story and what helped me know what is the main theme of Ryan Neal's part in this film. What is his theme? And when did I know it was over? So, but, I had to do that 5 times in that film because there were several different characters. Mm-hmm. So those stories don't always finish at the right time.
Yeah. Yeah. I could ask you what is the right time, but I think I've always wondered, you have a journalism degree from NYU. You have a radio,
another journalism
degree, a master's from Columbia, and you're a filmmaker. How do you make a transition from, obviously journalism has like a strong corollary to documentary filmmaking, and radio has it combined, I understand, the visual and the storytelling, audio storytelling, but it seems like a big lift to me to go from those two things to then making a film. And specifically within film, there are structures to storytelling. There are ways to go about this. Mm-hmm. And from what I've seen of your body of work, you do not have a singular style of storytelling. I think you have singular themes, and I'm happy to, offer my opinion of that. But stylistically, particularly the Trees film, kind of being based on the Overstory, the book, The Overstory, and HBO asking you to kind of weave these narratives together after the success of Richard Powers' book, was like a profound filmmaking challenge, because that book was like so cutting edge in how it used these narratives and tied them together and used sort of the tree at the like center of the thematic. But to go from radio and journalism to documentary filmmaking, and then inside documentary filmmaking to have such a diversity of forms in all of your body of work that you've told these stories in, how do you make that leap from these subjects that are slightly connected or have like a tangential theme, you know, and connectivity, but then you went in a totally different direction? And I've always been amazed by that.
Well, first of all, this is your podcast. You're in charge. So you get to tell me whatever you want.
I'm the director
That's
here.
Right. That's
I'm the
right.
director here.
I'm enjoying sitting in this seat.
Do I have the trust of my subject?
I think that, so I do want you to return to the themes you think my films that you've seen do address, because it might help answer this question. The answer I can give you right now is that so I had a bread and butter career probably until my early 30s, where I was making television documentaries. So shorter documentaries that were with commercial breaks for commercial television. This was back in the 90s. And I also worked for an organization called Witness that was founded by Peter Gabriel, where we gave small video cameras back in the 90s when that was still a new thing. And we gave them to human rights activists around the world, and they would send us their footage. And it was my fortunate and unfortunate role in that organization to watch what they sent, to watch raw footage. And it would be raw footage of human rights abuses happening in real time. I watched torture. I watched interviews within an hour of a woman being raped by a soldier. I watched people get their legs blown off, you know, and my job was to try to find a home for this content, as if it was just like in the ether, and we're trying to give it form and shape and a start and a middle and an end that people can digest to learn about what's happening in Nigeria, Northern Ireland, you know, all these places where our cameras were. But I think what really defined what I've been doing for the most of my enjoyable career, not that I did not enjoy that, but a job like that where you are watching raw footage of misery, you need to do that in doses. I don't think it's sustainable. It wasn't for me. So I moved to Portland in my early 30s from New York City, and I had nothing to do. I quit, by most people's observations, a great job. I worked at CBS Sunday Morning. I was a producer of news pieces that were 8 to 15 minutes long, but they were not hard news. They were about history and culture and art. And I left the job because I wanted to change. I essentially wanted to leave New York. And when I got here, I painted every room in my house. I started teaching darkroom photography, film history at an arts high school, like a magnet high school that was for artistic, minded students. But I really needed to fill my time. I had a lot of energy. And my parents were diving headlong into this life experience where they wanted to get cochlear implants. I told you earlier, my parents are both deaf. They'd been deaf their whole lives. And I was just talking with a journalist about it over a coffee one day. And thank goodness she knocked some sense into me. And she said, "Well, you're going to make a film about this, aren't you?" And I thought, yeah, that's actually a really good idea. But here's my point. That was an autobiography. And that was a seminal film for me, because even though I was telling you my parents' story, I was telling it to you from my point of view, literally in the first person. I narrate the film. Now, when you go to Columbia Journalism School, or you take reading, writing, and reporting your freshman year of college in a journalism or, communications degree, the number one thing they tell you is don't put yourself in the story. Well, I broke that rule. Very first film I made that was of length, more than 20 minutes. I'd made plenty of films up until that point, but they were in increments or, I never had more film. I didn't have one continuous film storytelling section of, more than 20 minutes. So I was embarking on a feature-length film, 80 minutes, 90 minutes, 2 hours, something like that. I didn't know. And this same journalist friend of mine, she was an NPR reporter, and she told me in the same coffee, well, you're going to make a film, and you have to make it from your point of view.
Who was this person?
Eve Epstein. She actually, for those in Portland, you would have heard her voice on OPB for 20 years. She was the managing editor at OPB Radio here in Portland, but she was the managing editor of Marketplace, the national NPR program, the business program. And she also went to Columbia, as I did. And she said, I think what makes this film special, because cochlear implants had been around for a while, and that's the device my parents were opting for to try to experience sound. And so they had been around for 6, 7, 8 years. So it wasn't like a breaking news event. It was really about what they were dreaming for and the fact that they were doing this together. And they would enter this experience together, but would they have the same experience? And if they don't, what will that do to their relationship? They were my parents. They were happily married. They were in their 60s. And to tell it from a daughter's point of view, who does have the experience of sound, she thought that was critically important. So that film broke the rules of traditional journalism. And that film did way better than I ever could have dreamed. I sent it to Sundance. I got in. I won at Sundance, the Audience Award. I showed the film probably in 10 or 12 different countries that I went to, from Korea to Russia. We took it to Abu Dhabi. We took it all these places. And I realized that I had told a very universal story, because it was a family story. It was a love story. And it was told in real time. And I would observe I would tell my observations as I went. So there was something about that style of storytelling that was delightfully subjective for me. I threw out the window all of those lessons of objectivity. Well, you have to be objective. You have to be fair. I didn't have to be fair. I was their daughter. I was allowed to have opinions. Didn't mean they had to listen to me. Mm-hmm. So, and the story is really not about our relationship, but the access that I had to all those little moments, whether it was when they got out of bed in the morning or when they were having a moment or an argument or a profound moment of connection, because I was their daughter and because they trusted me implicitly. I was able to tell a story that felt familiar to other people because I was there for all those moments that many of us are there for when you're in a family. It's dirty, it's messy. Sometimes it's precious and tender, And so the fact that the film did so well all over the world told me something about, if your subjectivity has value, that's really just as important as of the topic of the film. So, people would ask me when I would tell them, it's funny because at the time when I was making the film, people would say, oh, what are you working on now? And I'd say, oh, I'm making a film about my mom and my dad. Oh, that's cute. That's nice. Is this your first film? Is this your first film? And I'm like, actually, no. I've worked as a professional journalist now for about 5 years, but it's, I wasn't that experienced at that point, but I'd certainly been around the block. I had done this enough. But I think that it was that first film where I got to break the rules, feature-length film, no commercial interruptions. I am responsible for your experience for 90 minutes of your life. And where do I get dense in my storytelling? Where do I let loose? Where do I make you smile? Where do I bring you intensity? Where do I take my foot off the gas? All of those things really matter when you have someone's attention for 90 minutes. And so I think that really started me on the path where I am today, is that I did have that classic training. I did learn how to read. I learned the reading, the writing, the arithmetic, but I didn't really develop any soul in my storytelling until I made that film. And since then, I've made, depending on what you call a film, 12 or 13 films since then. And there's only been one more that I did where I narrated the film and I brought myself into the film. And that was effectively a sequel to this film I made about my parents. It was called Here and Now. So otherwise, all of my films are a little bit more what you would call objective. But because you've been my subject, and I know because I'm honest, of course my films are subjective. Of course I have an opinion. Of course I'm telling you something from my point of view, because you have no idea what I left out. And so I think the more that I can have that conversations with my subjects, if they choose to ask, and it's a very healthy conversation, I'm always happy to have it. I think really leaning into that subjectivity and saying, okay, well, so here's this bonsai artist and here's this filmmaker who's mid-career, I guess. I've done this before, but I still have a lot to learn. Like when we met, that's really where I was. I hope I'm still there, where I still have a lot more to learn. But the key is not so much what is your story, it's what is the story we are going to make when these two minds come together. Right? And I'll never forget when I made a story that was a total of 2.5 hours of storytelling, but it was for television. It was before I made Here and Now on my parents, but it was another family story. I told a story about a polygamous man with his 8 wives in Utah who were extraordinarily surprising people. All of the wives were very different, came from different backgrounds, looked different, acted differently, spoke differently, and they were all married to the same man. Go figure. It was very exciting for me because it was just like, wow, how does this happen?
Yeah.
And for me as a woman, it like went way deeper than just, oh, how did he get so lucky? It went way deeper than that. But I'll never forget that there was a moment where I was interviewing the husband for the final time in the film, and he was dying of cancer. And I didn't know he was dying of cancer until maybe a few weeks into the filming. And so when I finally finished filming with him and his wives and their children and their grandchildren, I said, why did you let me do this? Why did you trust me? It was a question that I asked him when he was on camera. And it ended up going in the movie because I thought his motivations were important for the audience to understand. He wasn't trying to brag. He certainly wasn't getting paid. We didn't pay him for this. He said, I wanted a family album, and I trusted you to tell it.
Whoa.
And he never saw the film.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
Holy cow.
And if I were the filmmaker I am today, I would have showed him the film. But I was not the filmmaker I am today. I was 29 years old. I was working for 3 or 4 bosses above me. It wasn't my film to show. I was just the director. But it wasn't my company. It wasn't my risk to take. And, that is one of the cardinal rules in journalism, is you do have to respect a certain chain of command. If you want the legal system to protect you as a journalist in nonfiction, you can't just go maverick and be like, oh, I'm going to show my subjects what I've made before I show it to the distributor, or the distributor who is going to take on the legal burden or the legal exposure, I guess is a better way of putting it. And so I just knew I really want to show him, because I think he may not survive until this goes on CBS. Ethically, I did what I was supposed to do as a journalist. I did not give the film to my subject before it aired. But it is something I will take to my grave with me, that I didn't at least show him something. And I feel bad about that, So there's not always a right and wrong answer, and I think that the opportunity to break the rules and to be rewarded for it with that first film, Here and Now, the opportunities that came after that for me as a filmmaker allowed me to make a living doing it, and really just allowed me to really dive in headstrong. And now I'm far enough into the career where I do see the end in sight. And you know where I want to go? I want to go back to pictures. I want to go back to just photography. And that's my retirement plan.
But you also said you want to go back into the visual-less narrative of podcasting and talking.
Yeah, I mean,
so that's interesting to me too.
It's more just like a. Yeah, I think trying to make money doing it would be stressful. Yeah. Wink, wink.
Don't do that.
Yeah.
That's a fact.
But I mean, you've got one of the best podcast names out there, Asymmetry, man. What does that not include? It's just so all encompassing. And yet for those in the bonsai world, it's like, of course, that's Ryan Neal's whole shtick, asymmetry. You love asymmetry. And I think, though, that you could take that principle of asymmetry and sort of define it to all of these other endeavors and crafts, even into human dynamics, And so I love the name of your podcast.
Well, that's why, but that's why I named it that. It's also why I named Mirai, because it's unlimited. And right. Mirai applies to everybody, everywhere, all the time. Every profession, every orientation, everything, all the time. Yeah. Everybody's got a Mirai. And asymmetry.
Well, you got to tell us what Mirai means. There might be people here listening who don't know.
Well, I think everybody probably does know, but it's the unobtainable future. The unobtainable future on a far sort of greater, deeper level, which is this notion that there is this idea of a future, and we all have goals or objectives or some romance or, idealism about what that future is going to be. And I think we all, or at least I do, envision this place that I'm going to get, where I'm going to actualize that vision. But in the journey of getting there, there's side roads, there's off ramps, there's sometimes big U-turns and detours, and maybe you find your way back to the same path that you thought you were going to be on to get to this place that you thought you were going. But you never actually get there. It never actually looks the way that you thought it was. And you realize in the process that the value is in the journey, not in the destination.
Well, you have just defined the process of telling a film, making a film.
With documentary film.
With nonfiction film. Getting back to just, it has as much to do with the person making the film as it does the person who the film may be focused about. I think...
You've got a duality of dynamics, because neither one of you know where you're going, right? You're just living life and you're capturing it. And it's pretty fascinating to see where that goes. And I think the other thing that's really interesting as a subject is you're thinking, okay, this director is if you sign on, obviously you trust them or there's some motivation to be a part of a documentary film, but you're living your life and your life is being captured as a subject. But there is a disconnect where the director, it's almost like you're aware. I was aware that you were living your own life, but as the subject, I'm not thinking about your life, and I'm just assuming that you know what's happening and things for you. You're almost like this neutral person out there where I'm not thinking about the pressures that apply to you and what you're bringing to a shoot, because you're following my process, but I'm not following your process or your life or your journey.
That's the outcome we want. I don't want someone to be too focused on my process, because then they stop being them.
Of course, but here's the thing is, you are what the film becomes, what you are capturing, how you interpret those moments, what you choose to isolate is you're watching that and you're seeing your own journey when you watch your films, which is to say that you are bringing to that experience the same thing that you are following in your characters and subjects. And that is really interesting for me to hear and to understand, because there is, in our experiences in life, there is this notion that these people that you're associating with that hold these roles in the relationship of being sort of a neutral observer, a documentarian, an educator, there is this notion that that person is like at this baseline of consistency and sort of neutrality and almost sterility, right? Like they're not being informed by all of these other factors that are impacting this person that is the subject of the action. The filming process, the educational process, the growth process, the journey. But at the same time, they're on a journey too, and they're bringing something to that, and that changes the final outcome of that, which makes it such a dynamic, it's like a dynamic pot of stew, you know, because had you had a different experience while you were making Trees than you did, Trees might have looked differently. But Trees is the outcome of the characters and the experiences you were capturing, along with your own experiences that formed you and informed the decisions that you made in that process. And that's really fascinating, because it creates, when you watch documentary film, what I've learned is documentary film is such a byproduct of these dualities of experiences that lead to this ultimate outcome that we're seeing. And the other aspect of that, and sort of this like X factor, is the input of the distributor, the input of the company that's purchasing it, the input of the company that's funding it, the input of the ambitions and motivations of what this film is going to serve, that financial component of the film. You know, and that's like a really tough thing too, because they might have a different objective and a different goal and a different outcome. And that was really what I learned about the journalistic process. I might trust the journalist, but what about the editor and the publication or the distributor and their impression and how that changes the film? And that is something that I didn't know. Because it's like, I do trust the journalist, and maybe the journalist had altruistic intentions, and then it's out of their hands and it's in the hands of an editor who has a totally different ambition or motivation or, you know, message or whatever that they're trying to deliver with the story. And all of a sudden it becomes, and it's like, but our agreement was this. And it's like, yeah, but this distributor that hired me and our agreement no longer matters to them. And it's just like, wow, okay. And that's not
that sounds like you've worked with someone who had very little control. I mean, in that instance, because I do think that sometimes it's overrated, this phrase final cut. Who has final cut of the film, right? So if I'm making,
is it overrated though? I think you put a lot of priority in final cut.
I think I do put a lot of priority in the final cut, but I do not mind sharing my almost final cut with a team of, okay, they're called executives. They work for the distributor, and it is their role to improve the quality of content as they define quality for their platform. They're also kind of curating. You know, I've done a lot of work with HBO documentary films, and I think one thing that is not arguable about what HBO has always done very well is they curate a lineup of films that is selected, and it's every year when you look at what they do, it's like the ballast of a boat. It's a balanced perspective of all these different kinds of stories. And so sometimes I will take what I think is a fantastic idea for a film, and HBO will say, not for us, not right now. And it doesn't mean that in 3 years they wouldn't have said yes, or 3 years ago they wouldn't have said yes, but like it's not. So that's just the reality if you want your films to be seen. Now, of course, today individuals have podcasts. We can put our own things on YouTube. We can self-publish. Sure. But there is an undeniable marketing force behind working with a distributor that has a reach in 50 countries. I could have never anticipated making a film that would become Amazon Prime's most watched documentary of all time. It got to that place 2 weeks after Amazon released it. This was a film I made called I Am Celine Dion, about Celine Dion. And it went to more than 50 countries. And it was the most watched documentary in the United States, then in North America, and then 3 days later in the whole world, ever on their platform. And it still is. I couldn't have cast a net that wide. So my point, though, to get back to the final cut, sorry.
No, it's great.
Is that there are, I don't want to say compromises, but it is the final part of the filmmaking process, which is getting it out into the world, in front of the eyeballs and ears of people in every country in the world. If you have a phone, you can watch a movie.
Yeah.
So I think that I never get bothered by it very much because I do get suggestions. Have I ever had a standoff? I have not. Am I lucky? Perhaps. But the filmmaker has so much control because they're not showing the distributor things that they've already censored out of the film.
Sure. Yeah, they don't know that. They don't know all those moments.
They don't know what they don't know, right? And the smart executives, they know that. They know that they can't know what's in my treasure trove. They're not watching my 125 hours of footage.
Right.
And the truth is, as a director, by the time you are 90% of the way through your edit, you have your head so far up your backside, you don't even know what way is up. You're in love with the moments you're in love with. You're afraid that they're not going to like the moments you're afraid of. You've got all of those fears and anxieties and trepidations going into delivering the film. And if someone does have final cut on it, you're afraid they're going to, we say in the industry, kill your babies. You get the picture, right? They do feel like your babies. Scenes feel like your babies. No, not that one. Don't take me. Don't make me take that one out.
Yeah, of course.
And it's never been like that for me. But it should be noted, though I am a nonfiction documentary filmmaker, my films are not typically about issues that for example, take Laura Poitras as a documentary filmmaker example. Citizen 4, she has made, films that really matter because they have broke open information that no one knew about. They're journalistic and artistic at the same time. Now, in her case, it's a very
You've made those films. What are you talking about? The Boy Scouts film is absolutely that. I mean, you won a Dupont Award for it. The highest level of journalistic recognition.
Well, I did. I guess I did.
Yeah.
I guess I did.
I guess you did.
And
sorry to break your stream of consciousness there, but hey.
I don't mean that my films don't matter, but to to the credit of ABC News and Imagine Entertainment, who I made Imagine Entertainment was my Leave No Trace was a film I made, and I partnered with Imagine Entertainment, Ron Howard's company, and Brian Grazer. We partnered to make the film with my company, Vermilion, sold it to ABC News. And that film had a lot of legal hoops to jump through because the film points fingers at people who we believed to be culpable of heinous crimes. But they didn't ask me to change things. We just had to sometimes reframe the way we told you something and how we told it to you, because we do need to recognize that films have the power to change people's lives, and they can destroy people's lives.
Yeah.
So I wasn't going to wrongfully accuse someone unless I had a lot of information that had been vetted before me. And because I do have journalism training, and I've got some really good journalism training, I had the confidence to say, hey, I've done my homework here. My producer on the film, who was my editorial partner, he was a Pulitzer winner. You don't win Pulitzers, you don't win DuPonts because you're known as a liar or because you're known as massaging the truth. So we were both lucky in that way, and that, after we came out of that film, and when the film did get the recognition it did, by the Dupont Award, it really did not only reinforce our credibility, but most importantly, it let those men in our film who told us the story of how they've been living with the effects of abuse well into their 70s. Our youngest character in that film who was sexually abused was 14, and our oldest character was in his 70s. And you see what they all carry, and you see what gets worse over time if you keep carrying it, And the beauty of getting the Dupont Award, even being nominated for the Dupont Award, was the world saying to these men, we believe you.
Oh, wow. It was validating for them.
It was validating for them, and ABC brought them all to New York, all 5. And on a less fortunate note, the young boy, 14, and his brother, who at the time was 17, I'm sorry to say, could not come to the screening because they decided it was too upsetting.
Yeah.
They did not go to the awards. They did not go to the first screening, and they did not go to the awards. And on top of it, there was the complexity that they were of social media age, and they made a very big decision with the help of their parents and their attorneys to be a part of the film. But ultimately, I don't just hope, I do believe that is when the film or a film has the power to change people's lives forever. And I don't believe, I don't want to ruin people's lives, but I think it's important to call it as you see it. So I think that I do constantly keep myself in check on a moral level. The subjects I choose and the issues that come up in their lives. When we made the Trees film, God, so many themes and so many human experiences and big picture life issues. The Trees film, it's not a nature film. It's a film about people and their obsession with trees and where that has taken them. And I think that your story got more airtime, as we call it, in the film, not by too much, but the film starts with you and ends with you. When you say at the top of the film, here's a tree, look at this. This tells a story. You point all these things out. You take a bristlecone pine, best example you could possibly take in the world, the oldest, the oldest tree in the world, oldest tree species in the world. And so you set up for us at the top of the film, every tree has a story. And if you know how to look at the tree, you'll see the story. You'll see you'll see the marks of time. And I think that really was the overarching theme. But who would have thunk going into that film that you are going to be going to World War II? You're going to be experiencing a wretched tale of present-day violence. You're going to be watching the history of a profession come and go, which is that of being a lumberjack. Who knew that you'd be inside the mind of one of the most powerful timber executives in the history of the world, George Weyerhaeuser, and the motivations that may or may not have gone into, his legacy, which, as we learn ironically with you, and this is where, you take the Richard Powers principle. How do you make all those stories connect in some way? You don't know George Weyerhaeuser. George Weyerhaeuser doesn't know you. But we learn. Turns out George Weyerhaeuser loved little trees. And I thought to myself, if I could just interview George Weyerhaeuser, this to me would be in some ways an exoneration of a man who would be easy to demonize, and see that at the end of the day, at the end of his life, he couldn't name his favorite tree in his backyard, but he had that one bonsai tree that he's always loved, and it was a mess. You and all your people, you'd look at that and be like, man, that needs some TLC. But he sure did like that tree.
He liked it. Yeah, he liked it. I thought it was really interesting, the feedback you got, potentially even some of the controversy about including George Weyerhaeuser, because some people felt like you weren't hard enough on him. And it was because you're saying you do come with an opinion, you do come with your own perspective of things. And I thought watching your representation of George Weyerhaeuser was a tremendously sort of self-removed effort of storytelling, because I did not get the impression, still don't know how you actually feel about George Weyerhaeuser. And I know that there was a conversation at one point that you could have included that he actually hired one of his kidnappers later in life to work for his company, and had a tremendous amount of grace and human, I don't know, empathy, but like he was a unique character, and he brought a unique little skillet of ingredients that are tough to tease out, because he's like at one point, in one hand, sort of the leader of the greatest amount of deforestation of old growth on Earth, and also didn't seem like a bad guy at all. And so it's like, wow. And I thought I thought that you were removed from that. But I think all of these different aspects of each of your films kind of tie together to really what it seems like Here and Now kind of launched you into, which was this ultimate commitment to intimacy in your films that I think a lot of people shy away from, are uncomfortable with. It's very exposing. In some points, it's very controversial. And I think a lot of people don't want to go there, but your films go there. They went there with your family, both in Here and Now as well as in Moonlight Sonata. They went there in the Trees film. They went there in the Boy Scouts film. They went there in the I Am Celine film, where there was huge discussion of, was it moral or ethical to continue filming while she's having a massive attack that could have been life-threatening? And I know that you were asked about that a lot, but like, I just look at it as you have had this commitment to tremendous amounts of human empathy, and you've committed to showing that in your film. I mean, Chasing Slender Man. Beware of Slender Man.
Beware the Slender Man.
Yeah, beware. Sorry.
That's okay.
I have not seen the whole thing. But yeah, it's like pretty hardcore stuff. Like I don't know if you think about it like that, but certainly from the outside looking in, it's like, whoa, here is a storyteller, a journalist, an artist that's willing to take on a lot of stuff that people, I think opportunistic people would take on, but you're not taking it on in an opportunistic way. And so then the question becomes, wow, you're taking this on not to get ahead, not to take advantage of sensationalism. You're taking it on to dissect the human story and the intimacy and what led to this and what came out of it. And I've always wondered why.
Mm-hmm. Well, sometimes the hardest things to film are the most important for your film. So, I can think of a few examples. Filming Celine Dion for 40 minutes while she was effectively having a seizure. Technically, it's not called a seizure, but she was having a stiffening episode of this disease she has called stiff person syndrome. And it wasn't only life-threatening, it was a real-time emergency situation with 911 and a doctor on the phone coaching her manager and her bodyguard through this, and we filmed the whole thing. The kind of empathy that was able to generate for Celine to millions of people around the world when they watched it. I will take a hit. I will take criticism for turning the camera on, but I can tell you that Celine didn't want me to cut that scene down. Yeah. She wanted it to be just as it was, and it was already 5 minutes out of a 40-minute episode. Another point of filmmaking I can think of is George Weyerhaeuser. I had 30 hours of audio tape interviews with him from a museum. I had probably 3,000 photographs of him. I had old movies of him from board meetings in the 70s. I had so much archival material, and it was so important to me that I met him. He was still alive. And I asked his family, I asked the professional organizations he was still tethered to, including the Pacific Bonsai Museum, because he, of course, was responsible for funding and starting that museum. And it wasn't until we were about to finish the film that I asked one more time if I could interview George. And to my great delight and surprise, his family, and it was really up to his family, his family said yes. And we were still working on legal paperwork as I was walking in the door to his house. Like, that's how tenuous it was. To this day, I'm very grateful for their trust. The reason why I wanted to interview him is, one, because I actually felt like I wanted to meet this titan. He really is a titan, but I knew to expect him not to have a titan style personality. I'd watched enough raw footage of him to be like, wow, this guy is just, he's everyone who worked with him loved him. His underlings loved him. Yeah. He was very beloved by the people who he worked for. Or I'm sorry, for the people who worked for him. Yeah. By the people who worked for him. But there was another reason. And this is just my instinct. I knew that if I met him, I would have no choice but to be fair. So if he was a monster, then I could feel better about showing endless clear cuts, endless damage, endless this, endless that. And if he was not a monster, that would temper my choices, right? And meeting him, it was very clear from the moment he walked into the room that he was towards the end of his life. And this was a room of great trust. And the family had said, I think maybe 30 or 45 minutes is reasonable, because after 30 or 45 minutes, he just won't have the memory. He was suffering from dementia. Again, remarkable trust on the family to let me film with him. And I realized the moment he walked into the room, holding on to his adult daughter's arm, walking into his seat, I won't lie. I mean, he was frail. It was a classic picture of frailty. And for those who have seen the film, I chose to introduce him in person, in real life, showing this frailty. And I did it because that was my journey in then editing what came after that interview. I always started in my mind from that point of frailty and vulnerability, because once upon a time he was a child. That child was kidnapped. That child experienced humanity at its worst and humanity at its best, as exemplified by the fact that he even hired one of his own kidnappers in 2 decades later, right? But I always asked myself, what possibly could he have thought of trees after that event? He was sitting in a hole in the ground, staring up at Douglas firs for 2 days, 3 days, several days. And then he was also locked in a black closet, a dark closet. I chose not to go there in the film. I mean, there was so much we could have made a whole movie about George Weyerhaeuser's kidnapping and what he endured, but I couldn't help but to wonder, how does a small child looking up at a 200-foot tall ancient Doug fir, is that too tall? Are they not that tall?
No, they get way taller than that.
Okay. I mean, that must have been kind of scary. So in my mind, as a human being, not an intellectual, but I just thought, of course he loves small trees. Why wouldn't he love small trees? Big trees are scary. They fall on you, and I'm not saying there was some like undercurrent of psychosis where he wanted to cut down trees. It was his business. And also I realized in looking through these many years of archives, if you grow up, not just the son of a timberman, but the grandson of a timberman and the great grandson of a timberman, the moral table that you eat at every day about trees is not the table that most of us grow up eating at.
Yeah, sure.
Right? So you have to look at where he started from. And so when I saw him walk into the room, I had just lost my father. No one would ever know this watching this film. My father had just died within a year from complications of dementia. And it really brought a very human mark into my process. And I'm very grateful for the family for letting me do it, because it really allowed me to see him as we all are. We all, what does the Bible say? We all start as dust and we end as dust. I'm going to get that wrong. But it was chilling. And I cried when 3 months later, I found out he died. I got to interview, he lived into his 90s, and I got to interview him 3 months before he died. And yet he wasn't so far along in his dementia that he couldn't still share with us little parts of his personality. Dad, what's your favorite tree? I can quote I can quote lines from this film. Dad, what's your favorite tree? He's looking at a dawn redwood that he planted there 50 years ago because, he could get his hand on whatever seed he wanted, right? There's a dawn redwood in front of him. There's beautiful. He had turned his yard. He had just planted all of the, sequoias. He had Doug firs, of course. And he just looked around and he said, "Oh, I don't know." I love your laugh. That's how I felt. I just thought, how do you ask a timberman that question?
Yeah.
But then, he turns his head to what's in front of him and he's like, "Oh, well, here's my bonsai.
It's a beautiful little thing.
It's a beautiful little thing. Yeah. And I actually almost changed the name of the film to Beautiful Little Things because, of course, even though he loved these beautiful little things, it was the big trees, the big guns that he worked with, So I always try to meet my subjects. And I made a film that's coming out on HBO in 2026 called Siren, The Voices of Shelley Beatty. Shelley Beatty's no longer alive. She's a deaf woman who effectively was a professional athlete. She was a bodybuilder in the early days of women's bodybuilding. She was a American Gladiator, one of the first reality shows we had. She was a professional sailor, and she ended her life by suicide about 15 years ago. And it was so hard to make that movie. Every movie is hard to make, but that movie was hard to make because I didn't get to meet her. So everything I was relying on was through the filter of someone else's camera, someone else's experience, someone else's memory of her. And so I really never felt quite satisfied that I nailed it. And we just premiered it in New York a few months ago, and I still have yet to speak more in depth with her family, but her husband did call me about a week after he saw it. He said it took him a little time to digest it before he could call me, but he gave me a lot of reassurance that I did nail it.
Oh, wow.
And
how validating was that?
It was very validating, particularly because he was, one could say in her life story, he could easily have been considered a flawed human.
Sure.
And he was her husband, but became her ex-husband. And, and I think he trusted me also. He's also another one, like George Weyerhaeuser. It took a couple of years before he said yes. Yeah.
Well, you said something about the Trees film. You said nobody could know that your father had passed away, but in the Trees film, you show his passing. And so obviously the timeline for you to interview George Weyerhaeuser and the loss of your father, but like, how this is what I'm saying, your like ultimate commitment to intimacy in your films on a level that really is not very often seen. You created Here and Now. You created Moonlight Sonata about your oldest son, Jonas, who is also deaf, which started to track sort of the onset of dementia for your father. And then the Trees film really sort of through the metaphorical association of the vines choking out the trees, in urban Portland. It's like this creeping thing that's impacting a lot of people, really impacting your dad until the point where he passed away.
Yeah, I believe it or not, when I said to you, no one could have known my father had just died, except the fact that I included it in the film. So I guess everyone could have known. I actually just lost sight of that for a moment.
Yeah.
And I think certainly the family could not have known, right? The family could not have known.
Yeah, not at that time, for sure.
At that time.
Yeah.
And they trusted me anyway.
Sure.
And who knows, maybe like the polygamist, they kind of just wanted a little family album. They wanted to see what I would make of it. And I hope I can talk to them more about it someday, because I am grateful, very grateful for that. Particularly because I think there are some very positive parts of his legacy that have, without a doubt, buoyed the bonsai community and the ability to make a living doing bonsai, But I think that the Trees film, what is notable pertaining to this conversation, as I said, I only one more time put myself into a film, and that was when I made Moonlight Sonata. Moonlight Sonata came out about 15 years after Here and Now. And it was effectively a sequel to Here and Now because it told the story of the next generation of deafness in my family, notably with my son, who was born right when I made Here and Now. And while I was making Here and Now, I did not know he was deaf. He was so young, and he had passed his hearing tests, so it didn't occur to me that he was deaf. And we don't know if the hearing test failed, but we suspect actually that he lost his hearing rapidly in the first year of his life, which is why he passed that. My point, though, here is that I forgot in telling you I've only made one more film, is that actually in the Trees film, I became a character again. Mm-hmm. And I will say, back to our conversation about final cut and where is there room at the table for film executives who work for all the major distributors. Well, I say there's a lot of room because in that film, in the Trees film, in your film, the film that you were in, we were a third of the way into making it when one of the executives on a phone call said, "Why don't you put yourself in this film? This whole story about Ivy and like you're just so obsessed with Ivy. Have you thought about filming yourself?" And then I realized in being put to this task by a film executive, yeah, sure, I could make one story out of 5 autobiographical. That's fine. I can do this. I've done it before. People who know my work know that this is kind of my thing. I can do it, right? Then I realized, oh my God, part of the reason the Ivy drives me bonkers is because I feel like there is Ivy in my DNA. It's called aging. And there's nothing I can do about it. Really, well, there's nothing I can do about the DNA. Yeah. I can mitigate it, right? And so then I just thought, okay, well, this is autobiographical. The sky's the limit. I can choose. I'm in charge. Yeah. I'm in charge of this story. I'm not in charge of Ryan's story. I'm not in charge of George Warehouser's story. I mean, I'm choosing what to include and not to include, but I can't make up your history. Right. That would be unethical. But this, it was my imagination. And it was with the help of score, musical score, and animation, where I was able to sort of bring the heavenly host of death into this film. And I created this completely fantastical fantasy scene of my father dead. And with the help of score, hearing his last beating breath, beating heart breath. And of course, it wasn't actually his breath. It was music. It was a percussive instrument. And then we brought in Ivy, and Ivy just completely overcomes the image of him on his deathbed until it's all black. Mm-hmm. And to me, that was my way of understanding his death. He was a giant, like a giant tree. This ivy overtook him, much in the same way the plaques and tangles of Alzheimer's disease overtake the human brain. Mm-hmm. I mean, the corollaries were so visual to me. And in that regard, the Trees film became my third autobiographical film. Right. And then other personal things, namely with you and I, would end up coming out of that film. Sure. So that film ended up being actually just as close to me as the two films I've made about my family. Yeah. Yeah. Whew. What a journey. Goodness gracious. I mean, I've asked you this on multiple occasions, and sorry, I was hearing the fans down in the workshop. I've asked you this on multiple occasions, and I'll ask you to again here. Do you ever like step back and look at your reality and just go, whoa? Just like digest your reality of your
the cutting edge. You're a cutting edge documentary filmmaker who has made incredibly intimate films about your family and yourself. You've also dug into a level of intimacy with people unknown to the world and known across the world. And yet what I notice about you, or what I take from that is that it really, the scale of the individual, the level of personal reflection and sort of opening that story to an uncontrolled population to see it doesn't seem to faze you. It doesn't seem to be something that you consider in this medium that you're making that is so publicly available. It's distributed on the largest platforms on earth. And I ever just wondered, do you ever just step back and like see this body of work that you've made that's had so much, so many people have seen it over the course of your life and will continue to see it after your life? Do you ever think about that? Just the magnitude of what you've done.
Well, I do remember when I made Here and Now, and I just sort of watched it as if it was this thing outside. It was me, but I was having an out-of-body experience for a solid year and a half between when it premiered at Sundance, won the Audience Award, and then went on HBO. A year and a half. So it was a year and a half of film festivals, traveling the world with the film, taking my mother to Russia, and, taking my son, who it turned out was deaf and I didn't know it, to film festivals. I remember thinking, gee whiz, people think my family is interesting. I remember having that, but I think everyone's family is interesting. I think family units are interesting. I think, you talked me into making the Celine Dion film. Let's just name it. I didn't know if I was the right filmmaker.
I don't know how you couldn't.
Well, but here's the thing. I am endlessly interested in people. And I told you, Ryan, I have this opportunity to make a film about Celine Dion. I don't know if I'm the right filmmaker. I mean, I can't remember what I said to you, but I just remember you essentially saying to me, how could you not make this film? This is such a rare opportunity to see just the texture of a global megastar. I said, yeah, but like celebrity, I'm not that interested in celebrity. And you said, that doesn't matter. It's just such a singular life experience that, not a singular, I guess a rarefied life experience. There are very few people in the world who are known in 60 or 70 countries and their pop culture, and you helped me frame it differently. Oh, but I'm not a Celine Dion music fan. That doesn't matter, Irene. Well, I guess I know that. Yeah, that's true. That's true. It's kind of better that I'm not a fan, because then you see things for what they are, a little better,
a little more removed.
A little more removed. So anyway, you talked me into it. So I don't know. I guess what I would like to think of myself as doing effectively is, if you will let me get close, you, the film subject, if you will let me get close, I promise to honor you in all of your blemishes, for all the trees you've cut down, for all the people you may have, I never in the Boy Scouts film, I never talked with or interviewed a sexual abuser. I chose not to. I chose not to give anyone that platform.
You thought about it?
I thought about it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Huh.
I thought about it. And I didn't think there was room for it.
Sure.
Morally in the film, because my subjects, all of whom were victims and survivors by the grace of the universe and God, I'm not going to force those two people in the same room.
Yeah.
You know,
Of course.
I don't mean a literal room. A film is a room. It's a table that we come to eat at together, and I'm not going to put them at the table.
Sure.
I'd have to make another film about that, which I am not sure I would want to make. But in any case, I think that I find everyone endlessly fascinating. And I think the only reason I don't talk to my Uber drivers the entire ride is because I'm just too exhausted lately. You know, like I love meeting strangers. And I think the more I make documentaries, the more I realize, wow, I wonder what that person goes home to at night. I wonder what that person's life is like. I really do just have a bottomless pit of fascination.
You have a bottomless pit of Sonder.
I think that's something my 16-year-old taught us, or who taught us?
Yeah, Cyrus. Yeah, when he put a word to that sensation and that thought, it was like one of the most like aha moments that I've had, like in life. Because I remember during my apprenticeship, I used to look up at the bullet train that would go by, Mr. Kimura's garden, and I would try to pick out one window and just turn my head fast enough to see if I could see a glimpse of the person in it. Mm-hmm. And I always would wonder, where are they going? Where are they coming from? What's their life like? And I remember camping out in the Sierras by myself for the very first time before I started college. I'm up on this big like granite ledge, and I like tossed a sleeping bag out there and slept out in the open air. And I was looking at a commercial airliner going overhead and thinking, I wonder where somebody in that plane is going, thinking about it going to Paris or New York or, you know, Australia, or who knows where it was going. And like, whoa, what are they doing? You know, and that realization that we all have, you know, like this infinite complexity.
Well, we don't all have it. I don't think a lot of people think about that. I think a lot of people do.
No, we all have complexity in our life.
Yeah,
and the sense of Sonder is to realize that other people have the same complexity as you have, right?
Well, and in a way, Sonder, you cannot have Sonder without humility, because so many of us are just so self-centered. And, you know, I think, you know, getting back to the notion of celebrity, you know, what have I learned making a film, spending a year and a half with, you know, Celine Dion, or about celebrity, is that the longer you're a celebrity, the more you exist in this alternate universe where you are out of touch with everyday things, like what do apples look like in the grocery store? 6 different kinds of apples. What does that look like? Because you don't really go to the grocery store anymore. Because if you did, you wouldn't get out the door without 60. Yeah, you know. So anyway, the longer you're in it, but it's also just, I think in her case, she has a remarkable, in spite of the fact that she has been so shielded from the world for her own safety. Since she was an adolescent girl, she has still this profound empathy for others. And I think she sees it, and I wonder, you know, I'm just thinking what a great question I could have asked her that I never asked her, which was, do you ever look out in the audience and wonder, oh, that woman I see, I wonder what her life is like. Like, I wonder, where does she go home to? Where's she going to go after the show? And I heard an interview on Elton John's Rocket Hour with a musician named Cassius Culpepper. Cassius Culpepper. And I love his music now. I've just started listening to it. And one of his hits is called Jenny. And so I find another podcast. See, this is the thing. I bottomless pit. So I find Cassius Culpepper on the Rocket Hour. Then I'm like, I look up podcasts, Cassius Culpepper. So then I find another podcast. And this podcaster says, okay, tell us about Jenny, with the assumption that she's a girlfriend or maybe someone he had a relationship with. And he was like, yeah, I was opening up for, who did we go see with the boys, the country singer?
Zach
Zach Bryan. I was opening up for Zach Bryan, and Zach was generous enough to invite me out on stage for the encore. And so here I am, and the crowd is just going crazy because Zach Bryan is playing for them an encore, and I'm just there. And I was like really feeling the energy of the crowd, which was substantially different than when I was on the stage.
This is what it feels like to be a superstar.
Yeah. And he was over on one corner of the stage, and he just looked down at this woman, and he couldn't take his eyes off of her. And my sense was maybe, she was attractive, but he just said something about her energy, just like he couldn't stop looking at her. And he talked to one of his bandmates about it after the show. And they just gave her a name. Her name was Jenny. That probably wasn't her name, but and I just thought, I love it, because there he was in the middle of trying to remember his chords, remember the lyrics to his song. He's singing. Actually, come to think of it, it wasn't even his own song. He's trying to remember the lyrics of a Zach Bryan song.
Right.
And he's trying to play it spontaneously. And he's sitting there going, I wonder where she's going tonight. Yeah. I wonder what her story is. I wonder what her life is like. And when I heard that, I just thought that was so sweet. I thought it was so sweet. But then I also thought I was marveling at the capacity of the human mind to do so many things at once. And you don't become a recording artist who can make a living without being able to play guitar in your sleep, or play piano in your sleep, or sing a song in your sleep, right? Sure. You can wire a tree in your sleep. You can listen to a podcast. I've watched you. You can talk. You can have conversations with 6 of your students, and you are wiring one of the greatest legacy trees in the world. It seems like you're not paying attention, but it's second nature to you, So I think Sonder, we find it in interesting places, and I think people who are capable of it, who genuinely have that curiosity, I like those people. I like those people because I'm one of those people. Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting. Wow. That really came full circle. I hadn't actually ever thought about that, like in terms of your filmmaking and what Cyrus told us about Sonder. Are there films that you still think I want to make that, where you have it in your mind? Like I would like to do that, like specific things, or do films kind of come to you because you experience these moments, or these people, or these personalities, or these things? Like what does that look like at this point in your career?
Well, I'll tell you say at this point in my career, I will tell you that question never gets easier because I never have a good answer. Oddly enough, I've never been like, oh, I want to make a film about that. It's always circumstantial. I don't think I would have made Here and Now, which, if not having made it, I would not be sitting here with you today, for sure, without a doubt. Not just as a professional, but as a human being. I wouldn't know you, So it's circumstantial. I wouldn't have made Here and Now if not for Eve Epstein from NPR. Right.
Have you ever told her that?
Probably.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm pretty grateful.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the only thing I can think of now, and I'm not saying this just because you put me on your podcast, is that I'd like to make a film about you.
About me? You already did.
Just you.
You already did.
No, I didn't. It wasn't just about you. It was about something bigger than you, which was trees. Because I think if we made a film about you, part of the cream at the top would be trees, but it would be a lot of other things too, And so, but part of the reason I want to make a film about you is not because you have not been explored before by others. I mean, you have how many podcasts do you have now? How many asymmetry?
No idea.
More than 200?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I have no idea though.
Yeah.
How many?
I didn't touch them when I was making the trees film because I was like, I can't go down that rabbit hole. I went down one. I asked you, can you just give me one or two podcasts you think I should listen to. You tell me. And you're like, well, I think I did a podcast with this guy named Randy. And you probably told me Randy's last name at the time, but I just remembered Randy. So I was like, okay. And it was really interesting. I'm really glad I listened to it. But that's the only full podcast I ever listened to before. I've listened to a few more since then, but I can't keep up with you. I mean, you're so prolific in several departments, because if I could listen to all of your podcasts, of course I'd learn more about you. And that's partly why I was like game to do this, because I thought, well, I'm just curious how you would do a podcast with me, because you asked and I said, okay. But, I think it's been a conversation, we've been talking about doing this for a couple of years now, and we're finally doing it. But so I just don't really know. I hate to say it because this spooks me a little bit to say it out loud, but I think the more I go through life, as I continue to go through my life, I have been spared the kinds of tragedies I have told stories about. Yeah. I have been spared a lot of the misery I have made movies about. And sometimes I am all too aware how it can happen to the most unsuspecting people, to the people who least deserve it. And I think that if there were people close in my life, if tragedy happens close to me, those kinds of things are where I start to lean in and I say, oh, how can I tell a story about this? Because the truth is, making movies is a cathartic process for me. And it occurred to me about 6 months ago. I can't get into all of my projects right now, but essentially I'm making 3 films right now. And they're all about women between the ages of 47 and 63. I'm 55. Is that a coincidence?
Interesting.
That's interesting. And they could not be more different, these women. They're very different.
No doubt about that.
And there is no, and I should say, of those 3 films, only one of them was offered to me. Mm-hmm. The other 2, I decided I would like to make this film.
Sure.
So I'm really thinking a lot about life in middle age right now. I'm experiencing it. I'm witnessing it. I have access, to use a journalistic term, I have access to others' people, middle life experience. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I feel really lucky about that because I see my own experience in theirs, and it helps guide me when to ask questions, clarifying context, because I'm there. I'm right there with you.
How much does or do the lessons that you learn making your films inform your own life? For example, you're making these films about 3 women that are at this same time or juncture in their life in differing economic circumstances and life experiences and all of that. But how does that inform you in your life? And over the course of your career, how have your films informed your life? Do you take something from that and feel like you're more equipped to handle life or whatever that looks, how does that, because you're...
Yeah. Let me try to give you some quick answers to that. So, if I am surprised or learning something or understanding the magnitude of something so take childhood sexual abuse, for example. My Boy Scouts film, Leave No Trace, is essentially grown men who have been living with this their whole lives. But 2 of my subjects were 14 and 17. I have currently 4 boys. I used that film. All the boys went to see it with us. I used that film as a way to talk to my children about sexual predators. Mm-hmm. Making Celine Dion's film, I thought about whether I should have kept the camera on or not when she had a life-threatening medical attack.
Yeah.
Furthermore, I thought about, do I show it to the world? Mm-hmm. She has nasal drip. She has blood vessels popping in her eyeballs. Do I show this to people? Mm-hmm. That was an epiphany in my career, that scene. Because when she told me, I showed her the film before it went public, without a doubt, with that scene in it.
Yeah.
And I didn't bring the scene up. She brought it up. Don't change a thing. Don't cut it. Namely, don't cut it. And then I realized this could help her on so many levels. Mm-hmm. And she used the film I made about her to talk to her boys about her disease. And I had the extraordinary good fortune to be invited into the screening in her living room with her two sons watching the film. So I was with her as a mother as she's watching the film with her boys. And this would have been the first, and I hope the only time they ever saw their mother go through something like that.
Yeah.
And I watched her gently coax them through the lead up to that moment. Now something's going to happen to Mom, but don't worry. Sometimes this happens, but I'm okay. Halfway through it, I heard her say to them, I saw her reach over and grab her son's hand. Are you okay? Yes, Mom, I'm okay. You know, like, I could not believe I got to witness that moment. I'm a mother too.
Yeah.
You know, and it made me feel really good because I already knew at that point, this was the second time I showed her the film. Right. Because she asked if I would come and show it to her sons with her. So I knew she didn't want the scene cut. So I knew she felt okay about it. Some other answers to that question, George Weyerhaeuser. Meeting George Weyerhaeuser and determining how much do I cast him as an evil villain and how much do I cast him as just a guy doing his job, or a guy who inherited his job. How do I show that? It helped me grieve my own father, and it also helped me be fair because it touched me the moment I met him and I saw him walk in the room and I saw how frail he was. It touched me in just a human place. Am I a tree hugger? Absolutely. Am I upset that his company and his grandfathers before him cut down old growth? It does upset me. But a lot of things about world history upset me, you know, so I just, you know, and so, you know, I was just telling you the other day during the Black Lives Matter movement here in Portland, it's like if I was not interested at that time to make a film about it, but I really was interested what it must have been like to be a cop in Portland during Black Lives Matter, because they were easy to pick on. And so one day I took my boys downtown. We were close by and I just said, hey, let's go to the belly of the beast. Let's go to where the bonfires are happening. Let's just drive right up to where the barricades are. We're going to drive right up. And one of my sons at the time was like, no, Mom, this is a very bad idea. Why are we doing that? I was like, look, let's just go talk to the cops at the barricades. Let's just see how they're doing, what's going on. And they were like petrified. And, you know, I think that when my films can help me navigate things in my own life, I am grateful. But what I ultimately hope, I'm not making them ultimately for myself. When I'm in the film, I am definitely honoring the person in the film with all of their blemishes, you know, but it really... It helps me along. It's like a toolkit. And my toolkit is funny. My toolkit keeps getting bigger in some ways. I have more resources, emotional resources, intellectual resources. I've lived more years. I just have more experience now, right? That's a bigger toolkit. At the same time, if I just had to pack a go bag, all you need is integrity, knowing where to point the camera. That's 100% of it. It's not just, do you need a good camera? Is it at the right frame rate? Bless your heart, you're trying to do all this filming these days, and you're not sure if you get the frame rate. It's like, well, at least you know where to point the camera. And sometimes, when you're making a film, that is not always clear. It's not always clear what's relevant in the story, And so I'm grateful for my films, for that. And so I think, at this point, with the time I have left, and I'm certainly not at the end of my career, but I do sometimes question how much longer I can do it, because running a business, as anyone who does run a business knows, particularly a small business, it's very tiring, and I won't miss that at all. And my first retirement project, I've already determined what it is. And now that I know what this first project is, it's like I learned in journalism school, you got to have a lead sentence. If you have a lead sentence, the where, the when, the who. Yeah. The where, the when, the who, not the why. The why is the body of the story, right? But the where, the when, and the who. Then you know if the story is, 60 words or 600 words or a New Yorker article of 6,000 words, you know what your story is. And sometimes the lead sentence doesn't come until the second act of the film, or, down into the fourth paragraph of the essay, right? But I feel like I now have more of a sense of how I'm going to taper off from filming, because my first subject, I want to take some cameras, still cameras, and just go take portraits of all the people who have given me their stories. That means I get to go back to Nepal. It means I get to go visit, it's going to take me so many places, and it's not the physical places that I'm excited to return to. In fact, that just sounds like a lot of work. Mm-hmm. If I could bring them all to me, I would bring them all to me. But I will just realize, job well done, because you found something common. All these people, what they have in common is they let you tell their story. Right. Because they all consented. Every single one of them consented. I'm not a kamikaze journalist. I don't want to be there if you don't want me there. I'm not saying it'll always be comfortable. But, so that helps me. So it's like, I know there's an end in sight because we all die, but I'm kind of like seeing an exit ramp, and the exit ramp isn't doing something. I'm not that interested in becoming better at bonsai. Mm-hmm. I'm sorry, I'm not, because there's too many things that I'm half good at that I want to get better at, and I want to get better at my portrait photography.
Very nice. Very nice. I could talk to you all day. Obviously.
We do.
We do. I mean, we are married, so that also is a thing. But I really appreciate you. I really appreciate getting to sit down and talk with you in this way. Not like we haven't talked about this kind of stuff or whatnot, but, I tell a lot of people this. The most powerful creative I've ever worked with is Irene Taylor. And I've told you that, whether or not you were able to hear it when I've told you that. I have definitely told you that. Just the way that I watch you synthesize information and the lived experience, and the manner in which you are bold enough to very authentically and genuinely go where other people will not, without it being opportunistic or ill in motivation, but to truly do so because I think the goodness and the kindness of your heart and the compassion and empathy that you feel for people allows you to tell a story about them that other people just don't have the tools to do. I think that is really, when you think about life lived on earth and your relationships with people, when you can really tap into the deepest sentiment that somebody has to offer, you've found something that 99.99% of the world did not. And that is like the ultimate epitome of creativity in my mind. And so seeing you do that, not just once, not just twice, not having personally experienced it, but seeing that happen across all of your subjects, which most people probably don't realize this, but you still have relationships with all of your subjects, positive relationships with all of your subjects. Having crossed these boundaries of profound exposure and stories that are not that easy for people to revisit about themselves or the people that they love, and yet you still have those relationships because they respect you. There's something beyond words that says. It is the fact that you are able to go where other people can't with a method and manner of integrity and honesty, and I think pure intention that a lot of the world doesn't get to see or experience, and I really respect you for it. So it's really been a pleasure to get to talk to you like this. And yes, it's been several years in the making, but I don't know that I was equipped to talk to you about this until now. You know?
Yeah.
So thank you.
Well, thank you. Yeah. I'm glad that I can contribute to the balance or imbalance or asymmetry of your podcast legacy.
I don't know about a legacy, but certainly talking with people that just the same as you making film, you're making films that is it a coincidence that you're making 3 films about people that are in sort of your generation right now as you're navigating this own portion of your life? Is it any coincidence that I choose to talk to people that are discussing things or whose opinion I respect or whose perspective or lived experience I respect about where they're at in life? This is one of those outlets for me. So, and which is why I really have no desire to try and figure out how podcasting affords me a living. It's too, I'm able to be too honest and pure with it to try and monetize something like this. It would ruin it. Yeah. I at least have to keep it clean.
Yeah. So. Well, thank you for giving me the opportunity to be the interviewee.
Yeah.
That doesn't happen often.
Yeah. No, it really hasn't. I mean, we ask each other questions, but
well, I mean, I'm interviewed. When it comes time to release a film, I'm interviewed, but I'm asked. I don't have the opportunity to go deeper than time allows,
Yeah, and small little sound bits for. Yeah, I've been there for those interviews, and I thought it was a shame. Because you are a storyteller. You tell your own story pretty well.
Thank you.
Yeah.